Hello, welcome back to the Buchla Easel tutorial series. Today we're going to embark on our exploration of the effects page. There's quite a lot in this, so we'll split it over a couple of episodes. Before we actually get on to looking at the effects themselves, let's just have a quick look at these controls at the bottom of the page. They're kind of tagged on, they're in a strange place. They shouldn't really be in the effects page, but whatever. The gate responses, gate 1 and gate 2 response, try to mimic the individuality of the Vactrol-based gates of the original instrument. If you go back and have a look at my episode on the dual low-pass gate, I talked about the fact that they've got these light-dependent circuits called Vactrols, and each of these physical units had different characteristics, and they've tried to model that to an extent. What it basically gives you is different lengths of gate. Now, in all of the tutorials up until now, everything that we've done has been on medium mode. So this is the sound that you're used to hearing. When I press a note, that's what it sounds like. If I set the gate response to slow, you can hear now that there's a longer tail on the gate. It's like the envelope's been stretched. That's the gate itself just staying open for longer. And with fast, it tightens up and closes really quickly as soon as I let the key go. So for each of the two gates, you've got these three options where you can basically impart a little bit of individuality. There's nothing stopping you, for instance, having different instances of the machine with different gate speeds to mimic some of that kind of real world 1960s-ness that you got out of the original analog kit. The pulsar gate setting has a more dramatic effect. If I throw the envelope away and plug a pulsar into gate 1 instead, I've got the pulsar set to keyboard mode here. If I press a key on the keyboard and hold it down, when we're in hold, the pulsar doesn't begin its release envelope until I let go of the key. Whereas in trigger mode, you've got your typical traditional pulsar response. So this does have quite a dramatic effect. It basically, in hold mode, turns the pulsar into much more like an envelope generator. Okay, let's have a look at the effects themselves. Skip over bypass because that's literally an absence of something. Start with flanger. And for these examples, for the moment with the modulation effects, I'm going to use the modulation oscillator set to sawtooth mode, so we've got plenty of harmonics to play with. So here is our bass sawtooth sound, and then we've introduced a flanger over the top of it. Now I'm going to pull this rate down. Can you see this ripple travelling through the wave backwards and forwards? That's the flanger. What's happened is that a copy of the wave has been taken, whatever, we've got a sawtooth wave here. So you take a copy of it, you offset that wave slightly. That's your delay time. This is how much the waves have been offset by. And then you begin to modulate the pitch of the copied wave behind the scenes, and the interaction between those two waves causes the flanging effect. Now, flangers tend to operate best around very, very small delay times, 0 to 15 milliseconds. Depth is the amount through the frequency range that the modulation will be applied. So let's hear a bit of a mess with the depth. If I pull the depth right down, then we're hardly having any effect. The modulation is very light. As I increase the depth, we travel further through the frequency range. Now you can see it travelling further and further, occupying until eventually travelling right the way through the entire frequency range. Rate is the speed at which that happens. Say with flangers, bring your delay timers right down, make them as small as possible. One of the other really important effects with flanging is that they have their own internal feedback loop. So the modulated signal is fed back into the flanging unit to accentuate, basically pick out resonant frequencies. And this is where flangers really start coming into their own. You get these high kind of metallic pitches that strobe through the sound. Let's try to find those. There we go. So that, in my opinion, is the best way to set up a flanger. Really short delay time, masses of depth, masses of feedback. This is not a subtle effect. In the same family as flanging is the chorus unit. I've jumped over phaser temporarily. Let's have a look at chorus next. So this uses the same basic physics as flanging. Take a copy of the wave, offset them, modulate the pitch of the copied wave. The two respects in which choruses and flangers differ primarily are that flangers operate in the 0 to 15 millisecond delay offset. Choruses have bigger offsets up to 50, 60 milliseconds at an extreme. And flangers have the feedback unit, whereas choruses typically don't. Other than that, they're basically the same electronic circuit. So choruses are supposed to produce a gentler, more subtle effect than flanging. Now in this easel, I find type 2 to be the nicest sounding of the three choruses. The manual talks about different algorithms, but it doesn't go into what detail. They're basically increasing harmonic complexity. I find type 1, we'll look at it briefly, but I'm not a fan because I can't get the pitch variation under control. It always seems to me to be closer to a vibrato than a chorus. You get this kind of pitch wobble, and it's hard to make it go away. I don't want that out of a chorus unit. If you do, awesome, use this. With type 2, you just don't get that effect. There's some of it there, you can still hear a little bit of it, but it's more controlled. I'll say at this point, I'm not the biggest fan of this chorus unit, I must admit. But anyway, let's push on. Let's have a look at the stereo width. What's that all about? Well, it's not genuine stereo chorus from a mathematical perspective. They've basically chopped the modulated signal in half and sent it to the left and right channels, and then given you the option to pan between these two different effects, and the rate at which the oscillation between them is accomplished is done with the rate knob. So if we crank stereo width right up, you can hear it bouncing backwards and forwards. But it just sounds like a load of bees to me. In type 3, we've got a richer harmonic sound. It's got more frequent, more harmonics to it, and I can hear the kind of the enhanced complexity, but I can't really hear a significantly different or improved chorus sound. It just sounds to be kind of muddying. That's about as good as I can make this thing sound. Next we have phaser. Now I've recently done a video on how to build your own phaser from scratch, so I'll send you a link to that. If you want to go and have a look at the physics behind it, you're welcome to. So let's just concentrate on how it sounds for now. And what you're going to notice is that once again notches pass through the frequency curve. Now this time they're being accomplished by a completely different physics process. Let's not worry about that. Let's just concentrate on what we can do with them. So the rate controls the speed at which those waves pass through the frequency spectrum. And you can hear two separate phases in operation here. Got two completely independent phases. Try not to get too fixated on the word stage. I think it's a little bit of a misnomer in this module. Basically treat it as phaser 1 and phaser 2. Depth describes how far through the frequency range the modulation occurs. So at maximum depth, we sweep all the way through the frequency range. You can see the two waves passing independently. Pull the depth right back. We have a much more gentle kind of passing across the frequency range. We're no longer spanning the entire distance. Finally, we have feedback, which allows the phased signal, the modulated signal, to be passed back into itself, and it's going to pick out individual resonant frequencies. You hear these spikes. You can see these spikes. They're the resonant spikes, resonant peaks. You get a really kind of intense, you can hear it now, it's basically self-oscillating. Sync locks us to the rate of the host DAW, and then we can, when we're unsynced, we can control each phase's rate independently. And we also have a hidden button under here called dual mode. This basically does this. Oops. When dual mode is engaged, the two phases are basically mixed together. When dual mode is disengaged, each phaser has its own thing to do in each of your ears on the left and right hand side. So if I make the rate of stage 1 really low and stage 2 really high, I'm hearing the right hand ear, got this wow, 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 wow kind of thing going on. But over here it's a much more stable sound. In dual mode, it's mixed both of those signals together. Delay is probably the most ubiquitous of all effects, so I don't propose to spend much time talking about it at all, except to say ping pong is simply a left to right kind of effect. Take ping pong off, and then the effect is the same in both channels. Other than that, feedback makes the delay last longer, and time does that. Analog delay needs a little bit more looking at. We've got a pretty simple thing going on to start with our feedback. We have a tone control on the feedback. If I turn that all the way up, it basically means the tone of the sound is retained on each repeat. I'll play a higher note. Okay, if I pull tone back, it means each successive feedback step, an LFO applies and throws high frequencies away. Hear it get duller and duller and duller. Now we have an LFO that can be applied, which basically introduces pitch variation. And the rate is the speed at which the pitch variation is applied. So you've got a little kind of wobble going on in the background. Sounds like Colony of Slipperman. And I think that's a good place to stop. That's delays and modulations taken care of. In the next video, we'll have a look at some of the saturation stuff and the compressor, see what they've got to offer. The destroy option in itself is subject of a video all on its own, I think. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider subscribing, hit notifications. You'll be sure not to miss the next one. Hope to see you then. Thanks a lot.